What's up, guys? I'm BTC. New information from Jeff Kaplan seems to confirm that we are in fact getting closer and closer to roll queue being a reality. Recently, Jeff Kaplan's been talking quite a bit about roll queue, and it's kind of funny because this is how Blizzard handles this sort of stuff, where when they first talked about deathmatch and capture the flag, they said, no, we're never gonna add it, it's not good fit for the game. And then they said, you know, maybe we could add it, and then a little while later they added it. And they're doing the same exact thing with roll queue. They started out by saying, no, we're never ever going to add it, ever. And then it kind of softened into, well, maybe we'll do it. And now recently, Jeff Kaplan's been like, yeah, we definitely want to do it. We want to do it. It's going to go into the game. And moreover, they know how they want to do it. They just have to actually go through the process of coding it and putting it in the game. So how is it going to work? Well, there's a bunch of different ways, and Jeff Kaplan did respond to some questions on the official Overwatch forums about this. The first question is, rather than having a hard-locked 2-2-2 system, wouldn't it be possible to have a soft queue or a role prefer system instead? And he responded by saying, thanks for the suggestion, it's actually one we've debated on the team. One concern we have is anytime we, the Overwatch team, make assumptions about what you want to do without giving you some agency in the situation. Our concern is we believe there are a number of players who want to or like to play different roles, but because they are thinking of the good of the team, they flex to needed roles. A player like this, under your design suggestion, is going to always end up having to play a tank or a support. We really want to avoid design solutions that further reinforce players being forced to play roles they don't intend to. I hope this explanation makes sense. To use myself as an example, by your suggestion, I am a tank main because most of my playtime is on tanks, but I really love playing healers and damage heroes as well. I would be worried if the game just assumed I should be playing tank all the time, because I did it so much previously, most to be a good teammate, not because that's what I wanted to do. Hope that makes sense. He does bring up a valid point where a flex player is more often than not going to be kind of shoehorned into playing tank or support as opposed to DPS. But the thing is, I've already solved this problem. In fact, I made a video back in July of 2017 based on a role prefer system, and it completely solves the problem that Jeff Kaplan is talking about, and it also solves a bunch of the other issues that are brought up with the whole role queue and the role prefer and all that sort of stuff. I'm not going to go into a full explanation because it would take too long. Simple version is this. For the competitive ladder, there would be two different ways to queue into it. You have the wild card, where you can just play whatever you want. You want to play DPS, you play DPS. You want to play support, you play support. You want to switch in between two during the match, go for it. It's wild card, you do whatever you want. It's kind of just like how the competitive ladder is now. And then the other way to queue into the competitive ladder would be the role prefer system. It's going to look back at your last 5 or 10 games, not too far back, it needs to be more recent history, and it's going to say, okay, you've been playing a bunch of support, so we're going to queue you into role prefer as support. Now, what happens if you want to play something else? If you want to play DPS, then you just queue into wildcard and you can play DPS. Now, what if you want to completely wipe out and change what your role prefer is? Because you would kind of be locked into it, wouldn't you? Because you've been playing support. No. All you need to do is have a single button that says, clear out my role prefer history, it wipes it all away, then you can play wildcard for however many matches, let's say 5, you play as tank, and then your new role prefer is now tank. So you can change it, switch it up anytime you want, you can wipe it out, or if you don't want to do that, you can keep your role prefer as one particular thing, like support, and then you can use the wild card to play DPS. Like, you can change it up whenever you want. It's not really a complicated system. The only thing that would really come into question is, does the wild card competitive ladder need to be completely separate from the role prefer competitive ladder? Like, is it literally two different matches, two different sets of games? And I'm not really sure. I did come up with the system. My system says that you can have them both together, and it's kind of explained in that other video. But again, the point is it would work, and it's not really all that difficult to do. But moving on to the next question, Jeff Kaplan was responding to someone who asked about having different SRs based on a hard-locked roll queue system. And he said that if we did roll queue, we would do separate SRs. This is one of the things I think would be really fun, plus make the game way more balanced and improve matchmaking. Judging by Jeff Kaplan's responses to this question and all the others, I think it's a pretty safe bet that when the roll queue does get added to Overwatch, it is going to be a hard lock roll queue system where you pick what you want to play, whether it's support or DPS or tank, and then you are locked into only that role for the entire duration of the game. So you can't swap to something else. But that makes me wonder, are they going to split top 500 into the 3 different roles and have a top 500 for tank and then one for DPS and one for support? Or are they going to just keep them all grouped together like they have it now? But I see a problem where you would have one player who has 3 different top 500 spots, one for DPS, one for tank, and one for support, and they just recently had to deal with some of that stuff with people having multiple accounts in the top 500, so they forced you to link your phone number and that sort of deal. I guess what they could do is they could say whichever of your ranks is the highest is the one that gets to take the top 500 spot. So if your DPS is the highest, then that gets it, and the tank and the support one don't get it. But, I mean, it's not really a big deal. I'm just kind of wondering here. So let's talk some of the good and some of the bad for having a hard lock 2-2-2 comp. Well, the good is that you would get rid of GOAT's comp right away. It wouldn't be possible. You can't have that many tanks. You would also probably have an easier time balancing the heroes because you don't have to worry about how area effect healing is going to apply to having 3 or 4 tanks on your team. You just have to worry about how it applies to 2 of the tanks, and that it's a lot easier to do. Now, as a result of this, if there is a 2-2-2 lineup, I think what's probably going to end up having is Brigida's probably going to get some kind of a rework, or maybe not a full rework, but a significant rebalancing, because as Jeff Kaplan even admitted, he said that in GOAT's comp, Brigida is great. Outside of GOAT's comp, she's complete garbage. So one of the problems that they have balancing that hero right now is that they're trying to weaken it for GOAT's comp, but at the same time, it's just getting worse and worse for everything else. The frustration factor for matches on the competitive ladder would probably go down. I mean, there's still a really, really significant problem with throwers that Blizzard seems to be completely avoiding, but that's an issue for another video. But as far as joining a match and you have 5 DPS on your team, or no one wants to play healer, or no one wants to play tank, those sorts of things are really frustrating, and that can tilt someone right at the beginning of the match into throwing or soft throwing the match. And if you get rid of that, I think overall the enjoyment is going to go up. I mean, it doesn't necessarily guarantee you the wins, but the fact that you don't have to worry about never having a healer or never having a tank is probably going to be a pretty good thing for a lot of players. The professional matches in the Overwatch League might get more interesting. You have to understand that they're pros and they're playing for money, not for fun. So they're going to use whatever is the strongest thing possible. Right now it's GOATs. Now if it goes into a forced 2-2-2, we may not end up seeing GOATs in every single match, but you might end up seeing dive comp in every single match, again and again and again. So just because it changes doesn't mean it's going to be necessarily more exciting. It might be just a different kind of sameness, if you know what I mean. Moving on to the bad stuff, the first one is the queue times. Jeff Kaplan said something to the effect of a tank would be an instant queue, a support would take a couple minutes, and then a DPS might take 15 or 20 minutes or more in order to find a match. Now, some people might say, well, you know, I'm willing to wait that time in order to find a game, but honestly, that's a very small number of people, and they might do it once, but they're not going to do it many times. So you're going to need to do something about that, and I think one of the main problems is that a lot of players just don't particularly find tanking or healing to be all that fun to do. Certainly there are people that do it. I tend to play more healer and more tank than I play on DPS. But to add on and compound that problem is that there are more DPS than tanks and healers combined. So if you just assume that every player has one character that they like to play most of all, then there's a better chance that it's going to be DPS than it's going to be tanks and healers. It's not broken up into a third for tank, a third for DPS, and a third for healer. It's more than 50% are going to be into the DPS category, and that's just because there's more of them. So Blizzard really needs to do something about that. They needed to release more than 3 characters a year. That needs to be sped up. They need to start adding a lot more tanks, a lot more healers, and they need to make them fun and exciting that people want to play. Another thing in the bad column is that it significantly reduces the possible creativity of a team comp. Because right now, you can have 4-1-1, you can have 3-3, you can have 2-2-2, and there's all different kinds of variations and combinations of all that sort of stuff. And if you were to get rid of that and force it into 2-2-2, then just by the very nature of that restriction, there's significantly less possible team comps that could happen. Now, unfortunately, because the way the game is balanced, it doesn't really get all that creative as it is now, and it's pretty much just the 3-3 of the GOATS comp just again and again because it happens to be the most powerful. So, in the one hand, you would be losing a lot of creativity, but on the other hand, because the game balance is so bad, then it doesn't really have creativity as it is now. Another bad possibility of the Force 2-2-2 is that you remove all possibility of mid-game role switching. If your DPS is having a bad day for whatever possible reason, maybe your tank can fill the DPS spot and that DPS can go into the tank, and maybe you end up winning the match. I've actually won matches because of that, where the DPS says, guys, I am just not doing it today. I need someone else to take DPS. Let me take your role. And we end up winning because of that. Now, there are other times when you kind of have to force the person off of the DPS because it's like, dude, you're not doing your job. Let me do it. You switch. And, you know, even in that case, you still end up winning. But the fact is, with this Force 2-2-2, if you're locked into your role, that can't happen. So if someone is having a bad time, then it's almost a guaranteed loss. But there is a little bit of a counterbalance to this because in a Force 2-2-2, you're never going to have those matches where you don't have a healer or you don't have a tank. So you'll end up winning those now, even though you might lose these other ones that I just kind of mentioned. Another thing, and I don't know if this falls into the bad column or the good column, I guess it depends on which side of the map you're on, and that would be in a Force 2-2-2, it would significantly reduce the amount of stall tactics that can happen in particularly the 2 capture point maps. Because as it is now, you might have your tanks or your healers switch to a Mei or to a Torbjorn or to Tracer or whatever, or you have all these different stall characters. And if you can't have your tank switch to Mei, or you can't have your DPS switch to a Lucio, or whatever, all these different things, then the amount of stall that happens is probably going to be significantly reduced. It's not going to go away, but it's definitely going to be reduced. And again, whether that's a good or a bad thing, I think depends on your side. Overall, I think it's a good thing to reduce that stall. I think it would make the 2 capture point maps significantly less frustrating and might actually make them a little bit more enjoyable, but that is definitely another thing to consider. So I guess the last thing to ask is, when would this role queue be happening? And I don't really think anytime soon. There is supposed to be that giant social update that we were supposed to get last fall, and we still haven't gotten it yet. That could possibly be role queue, and maybe they're just not telling us about it, or it could be something completely different that we have no idea. But I'm willing to bet if it's not that big social update that they've been talking about, we probably wouldn't see a fully done role queue system until at least this fall. So maybe they would announce it at BlizzCon or something like that, and then it would immediately get put onto the PTR, and then sometime, late December, early next year, we would have the role queue on the game itself, the live version. And that's a long time away. So I don't think the role queue is going to happen anytime soon, unless it is that big social update and they're just not telling us about it. But so what do you guys think about the Hardlock 2-2-2 role queue system? Do you think it's a good idea? Do you think it's a bad idea? Let me know down below. Thanks for watching, and if you'd like to see more, subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss anything. Also, come hang out in my Discord server and my Twitch live stream. Special thanks to my Patreon supporters. If you'd like to see what kind of cool VIP rewards you can get, check the links down below. And remember, always blame the controller, because it's never your fault.